Welcome to A Million Ways to Live. I'm Chris. I'm here as always with my co-host Cassie. We're going to dive into, explore, dissect a million different ways to live a good life. It should be fun. The show and life, they should both be fun. Okay. Hi.
Hi, Chris.
Do you know who or what we're talking about?
I think so.
You don't.
I do.
No, you don't, because I switched it on you.
It was supposed to be...
No, we're going to save that for another episode.
Okay.
But
okay, so no, I guess I have no idea.
You don't. It was a trick question.
Oh.
Today, for our Guru's recurring segment, we are kicking that segment off with Jim Carrey.
Oh, Jim Carrey is a guru?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about.
Okay.
Do you know much about Jim Carrey?
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. I mean, I know all of his movies, obviously. And then he was married to Jenny McCarthy, right? Was it Jenny McCarthy?
Were they married? I think I forgot about that.
I think they have a child together.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure. I guess I know more about Jim Carrey than you.
Well, I didn't dive into early
personal life
relationships. Definitely got into some like personal life stuff, but I think you're right about the Jenny McCarthy thing. But that totally was gone from my memory. That was in the 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jim Carrey has have you not seen anything in the last, say, 10 years about his maybe strange behavior?
Yes, I have. I don't recall specifics, but like, not that this is strange, but didn't he like grow a full beard, kind of like Mountain Man looking?
He did do that. I think that was for a movie, though, and then he might have kept it.
Okay.
But no, the strange behavior is how the media describes what actually has some thought and not so strange explanation behind it.
Okay.
So what was happening is he was getting a lot of different like red carpet interviews. So the little 30-second interview as he's at
a movie
one was at a movie premiere, one was at Fashion Week. There was several for like his movies where he would be asked pretty straightforward, normal red carpet questions, and instead of responding in the expected way, he responded in more of a philosophical way.
Okay.
And this threw everybody off, and you started seeing headlines about, is Jim Carrey going crazy? What's wrong with Jim Carrey? And check out this bizarre red carpet interview with Jim Carrey. Things like that started popping up.
And this is like 10 years ago, you said?
Well, it's...
in the last 10 years.
I'm not sure how long ago those started. I have some examples of those, which we'll get into, but that phenomenon of his philosophical responses to normal red carpet interviews really starts with his much earlier life. So, do you know anything about Jim Carrey's personal life? Like before fame?
No, nothing.
Okay.
Zero.
So, first of all, let me say I love Jim Carrey.
Oh.
Like I've always liked Jim Carrey. I think Ace Ventura was probably the first movie that I saw with him. Definitely Dumb and Dumber. The Cable Guy with Matthew Broderick. That is a very underrated Jim Carrey movie. It's fantastic. Truman Show, The Mask, that psychological thriller 23, Man on the Moon, where he did the Andy Kaufman thing, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. There's 1,000 of them and 1,000 good ones too.
Yeah.
So Jim Carrey obviously was first stand-up comedian.
Okay.
You knew that.
No, I don't know anything about Jim Carrey. I told you what I know about him already.
So he first started out in stand-up comedy.
As most comedic actors do.
Yes. Okay. And while he had already done, say, I think it was like five years of stand-up. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about in the mid-'80s, 1985. This was kind of the first sign that Jim was, let's say, open to more spiritual and philosophical ideas.
Okay.
So famously in the 1980s, it became famous in the 90s when he told people about this, but as the legend goes, in the mid-'80s, he wrote himself a check for $10 million. And he dated it for 10 years later.
Okay.
So we're talking 1985. He writes himself a check for $10 million. I think it specifically said for acting services rendered.
Okay.
So this is Jim Carrey. Had some success as a comic. He got attention from like Rodney Dangerfield, legendary comic. Was doing objectively well in the stand-up world, but had his sights much, much higher.
Yeah.
So 1985, writes himself this check, an act of visualization, dates it 1995, puts it in his wallet, carries on.
Okay.
Starts doing his thing. And then sure enough,
by 1995, he could cash that check to himself?
Well, yeah, it was 1994 or 1995. He was paid $10 million for, I think it was Dumb and Dumber.
Okay.
So, like, very much
close to
manifested his success, as he would put it. And let's stop there and talk about manifestation for a second, because I think people take it too far in a literal understanding of manifestation.
Yeah.
I am not one to believe that I can sit on the couch every day, imagine $10 million, and then just open my eyes and someone will be handing me $10 million. But I do believe in the power of setting your sights on something, thinking about that and thinking about where you want to go with it, and that just having that in your mind, the reticular activating system, if you buy a red car, all of a sudden you're going to see red cars everywhere, that kind of thing. I believe in putting an idea in your mind and thinking about it on a regular basis can help you to notice the opportunities, or can kind of subconsciously steer you in the right direction toward the thing you're doing. You're setting a course for your mind.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot about our mind that we don't understand. Maybe we can literally manifest things in the universe. I don't know. I don't think it's quite that cut and dry, but nonetheless, manifestation and visualization comes up in his early career as well as later in his career.
Okay.
So that was the one of the big things that keeps popping up when people talk about him as a
guru,
spiritual, philosophical, guide of sorts. Let's go with guru. And so that happens, and obviously he does. He becomes a huge success.
Sure.
Not just Dumb and Dumber, but before that, it was, I think Ace Ventura was before Dumb and Dumber, but Dumb and Dumber was like his really big...
where he got paid.
His big payday that really satisfied his 10-year visualization goal there.
I'm going to go write myself a check now.
For what? Because he put it as a very specific...
amount, date,
and for what it was...
acting services rendered.
Yeah, so I'm all for it. Do it. But what will the universe pay you for?
I need to figure that part out. I can come up with the date and the amount, but I need to figure out what for.
Okay. Well, let me know when you get that.
Yep.
The other thing that he did early on, he has mentioned in interviews that he was big on affirmations, or went through an affirmations phase where he would...
I feel like affirmations and manifestation are like hand in hand. You know, dream boards and writing on the mirror, I am worthy, I am beautiful, I am special. You know, like I feel like if you see something about one, they go together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen some studies or heard about some studies like Andrew Huberman's
Mm-hmm.
podcast. He talks about the science of affirmations
Mm.
and how they may actually be somewhat counterproductive.
Hmm.
Who knows? But Jim has talked about how he used to go to sleep in his hotel room listening to tapes, affirmations tapes, like you are worthy, you are successful,
Yeah.
you are great, that kind of stuff. So that was early on. He was open to these kinds of things. And then, okay, career starts happening. He gets into all of these movies.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forwarding to now, knowing the philosophical Jim that comes out,
Mm-hmm.
and then looking back at all of his movies and trying to draw a line between them, it's really striking how many of his movies had deep philosophical themes that can be connected to the ideas that he's kind of proselytizing now. So, for instance, The Mask, which was 1994. People wearing masks in society, having the public persona or the people pleasing persona, the
Yeah.
part of your personality that you present to other people, is often different than your true personality, the uninhibited you that you are with your friends or with your family or by yourself. And so the mask is just a very on the nose example of that idea of duality or having different
Alter ego
personalities.
type thing. Yeah.
And that's something that comes out later on in his life. So he was in a quote or in a interview in 2017. This was he was talking about depression.
Mm.
And this relates to this idea of wearing a mask, playing a character in public settings.
Yeah.
And he says, depression is your body saying, fuck you. I don't want to be this character anymore. I don't want to hold up this avatar that you've created in the world. It's too much for me.
Huh. I've never thought of depression like that, but I can see that summing it up. Like, I can't continue on being someone I'm not all the time, and I'm going to stop.
Yeah, I think it's a real simplified explanation for
Sure.
depression, and it surely fits some people's version of depression. It's probably not an all-encompassing
No, I
definition
don't think so.
of depression, but it's interesting to think about.
Mhm.
Let's just put it that way. But what seems to be the turning point to where Jim like truly went towards a philosophical or I struggle to find the right way of describing it, but where he really turned toward all of this stuff was after he did the movie The Man on the Moon, which was the Andy Kaufman, another stand-up comedian, comedian in general. He played Andy Kaufman
Okay.
in this movie in 1999.
Hmm.
In 2017, a documentary came out called Jim and Andy: The Great Beyond. Did you see that?
No, I don't think I saw The Man on the Moon either. So we've got some movies to catch me up on.
So the Jim and Andy: The Great Beyond was a documentary film that follows. It was some old footage from when they made Man on the Moon, and it showed how Jim took this method acting approach to being Andy Kaufman. So in between scenes where cameras were not rolling for the movie,
Yeah.
he stayed in character and continued being Andy Kaufman.
I think I've heard about this on another, listening to something else about this specific example of him doing the method acting. Okay.
And so Andy Kaufman had characters
Yeah.
of his own.
Uh-huh.
So it was very meta in that he didn't just stay in character as Andy Kaufman, but he would stay in character as the characters that Andy Kaufman would play.
Okay.
And some of these characters were disruptive. And it was just kind of chaos. And Jim explains in that documentary what went through his head and what happened here. It was in 1999 when he got the role of Andy Kaufman. He was alone, like he got the phone call. He was alone at a house on the beach. He said he was watching a pool of dolphins swimming in front of him. And he said he suddenly sensed that Kaufman showed up. Andy Kaufman showed up, tapped him on the shoulder, and said, "Sit down. I'll be doing my movie." And at that moment, Carrey explained that he completely surrendered to that idea. And he said, what happened afterward was out of my control.
Oh.
And so that is his explanation of...
So the spirit of Andy Kaufman took over Jim Carrey's body for a period of time?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know if he ever says the spirit.
Well, I mean...
And what does that mean? But effectively, yeah, that's what happened.
Okay.
And then also in the same documentary, he says, at a certain point, I realized if it's so easy to lose Jim Carrey, just letting go of his own personality, he said, then who the hell is Jim Carrey?
Oh, that's deep.
And so his experience playing Andy Kaufman made him realize that our personalities are just characters we play in the same way that any other character he's ever played is just a character. He says that personalities are just an amalgam of experiences and things we've learned, but there's a truer you beneath all of that. In another red carpet interview, where he's got all these red carpet interviews where he chooses those as a strange time to
There was something.
just kind of say something deep that is maybe not the best setting for it, but that's when he chooses to respond that way. So in one infamous red carpet interview, he says, I don't believe in personalities. I don't believe you exist, to the person asking him questions. But there's a wonderful fragrance in the air.
That's weird. I don't believe you exist.
Yes, you as he's talking about
To
the
the person
personality,
interviewing him.
the character
That they are
that
playing?
person has
Okay.
become. And they're unconscious that it is not the true essence of themselves.
How do you respond to that?
Well, that person, I believe, just kind of
All
looked
right.
around and said, okay, let's move on.
Who's
or whatever.
next?
That's The Mask and the obvious themes that come up from that. And he's said a lot about those things and continues to. But then there's The Truman Show, 1998.
I like The Truman Show.
So you've seen that one.
Yeah.
This is a similar idea. Truman lives in a fabricated reality. He's unaware that his entire life is a TV show. And this reflects the idea that our perceived reality might also be an illusion. Which is something that people talk about in many different ways. So one is that, to make it, again, very on the nose, is that we live in a simulation.
Oh, yeah.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's...
As you know, I'm a big Armchair Expert fan.
Yeah.
And they talk about the simulation regularly on that podcast.
In what way? What do they say about it?
Oh, they think that they're living. So, for those of you who don't know, it's my favorite podcast. But Dax Shepard and Monica Padman host the Armchair Expert, and they say that they are living in Monica's dad's simulation.
They're joking.
Like,
They're not joking.
maybe a little bit, but I think that there's an element of seriousness because certain things happen that just don't seem possible. Like, the coincidences are just uncanny. Like, it's too much to have any explanation other than someone somewhere is pulling the strings and they're in a simulation.
What do you think?
I feel like
Not their simulation. What do you think about
in
that?
In general, I feel like that's really, really far-fetched. How?
think-
There's so many people, so many humans, like, what is in control of the simulation?
I don't know.
I don't know. Like, that's too big for me to grasp. So that's why I think it's
I heard,
not
I said
possible.
this recently. I had heard somebody say that raccoons are proof that we live in a
I
simulation.
saw that too. Where was that?
I don't
Somewhere
know.
on Instagram or something. I don't know. I saw that too. But
Raccoons are proof of that we live in a simulation because the bandit of
the masked.
yeah,
Yeah.
the bandit of the animal world, only a simulation could have that cute little creature be born with a bandit mask.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. The simulation. I don't buy into that.
So, Truman Show, as well as Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Have you seen that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, both of these kind of address our perception of reality. So, even if Jim doesn't go into his more philosophical life, again, just two very deep philosophical themes in these movies. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is about people erasing their memories, erasing painful memories so they don't have to live with the pain of, somebody they used to love and are no longer together. They don't want to remember the painful memories of losing that person. And so it makes you question reality. Is there what am I not remembering, or what may I have erased from my? I actually saw something recently that technology is possible.
What is that newer show that we watched that has that kind of similar theme where they go to work and their outside life is different?
Yeah, it's Ben Stiller made it, and it's on Apple.
Yeah.
Where they basically black out while they're at work.
Yeah.
And then go through the elevator, and then when they go through the elevator, their
essentially a way of eliminating painful memories from.
Yeah, which is another commentary on how awful work is. That we're thinking of TV shows like that's very dystopian of us.
Yeah.
Of
society.
Yeah. So in an interview on podcast WTF with Mark Maron, another comic, Jim says, talking about the Truman Show, he says, everybody's Truman. Everyone has their own bubble.
So I have a TV show about me, and
right now he didn't mean it in a literal sense. He meant that everybody lives from their own perspective. Everybody has their own bubble. Because if you remember in the Truman Show, they literally are in a dome that is made to look like the sky, and Truman is the one person in his bubble that doesn't know he is in a bubble. Everybody is in their own bubble. Everyone lives in their own world. I mean, that's the only way you can explain things like, the hardcore Trumpers who just like, how do you not see that this guy is a horrible monster? What bubble are you living in that this is somehow hidden from your understanding or unwillingness to there are things like that, not to go on a tangent of that sort.
Tell us your political views.
No. There are things that make it very obvious that, yes, everybody lives in their own world from their own perspective, and it is completely different than mine. Sure, some people like yours and mine are similar or cross over two concentric circles, and we're seeing the same perspective on these things. But there's some people who have circles that don't overlap. So, yeah, in that way, I don't think Jim's saying necessarily that everybody is being secretly filmed and is on their own TV show. Maybe. But I don't think that's what he's saying. And then other kind of notable philosophical tangents that he's gone through. He became a painter. Are you aware of that?
Like an artist?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No.
Yeah, he, obsessively began painting, like has done thousands of paintings. They did a documentary about him doing that called I Needed Color. It's called that because that's what he said. He said I needed color in my life. He was talking about living in New York in a particularly dreary winter. And it was in that winter that he decided to just start painting. He said, I think I needed color. And he went hard into painting and has done a lot of works that he's posted on like Twitter of people like Trump. So like people he considers to be terrible people, and he'll do a portrayal of them as, you know, kind of a monster in his paintings, usually with some kind of political commentary about them. He said painting is one of the ways that he frees himself from concern.
Okay.
In that documentary, he also said, what you do in life chooses you. You can choose not to do it. You can choose to try to do something safer, but your vocation chooses you. Then in 2020, he did a novel. He co-authored a novel. I have not read this book, but my understanding is it blurs the line between fiction and reality. In the book, the main character's name is Jim Carrey, and he works in Hollywood, and so there's obvious similarities to Jim's life, but then it goes on to some fictional storyline, and it's basically about the human's quest for meaning in the world. Another thing that has come up. So there's all kinds of, I've got pages and pages of notes here, but he has just done so much, not just in his film career, but he's said so much in interviews and on podcasts and in books, in his paintings. He's got a pretty wide philosophical career since his film career. And there's a commencement speech that he did at the Maharishi International University in 2014. It's got 16 million views on YouTube. And what I like about that particular speech is it kind of takes this spotty commentary that he's done over the years. So you got a little piece of information of what he thinks on a red carpet interview. And then you've got a little piece of information of what he thinks in an interview. And then his painting makes you think of something, one of his ideas, or enlightens you to one of his ideas. But he kind of takes it all and sums it up pretty well in this commencement speech.
Okay.
And so I'm going to play a little clip from it.
Okay.
This clip is about doing what you love in life.
My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that that was possible for him. And so he made a conservative choice. Instead, he got a safe job as an accountant. And when I was 12 years old, he was let go from that safe job. And our family had to do whatever we could to survive. I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want. So you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
You can see he almost tears up right there.
I almost teared up.
I think he really had, he loved his father a lot.
Yeah.
So that was an important thing for him right there.
And then also he went on to do what his father would have wanted to do. It seemed, he said his father could have been a great comedian, but he took the safe route instead.
Yeah, and so I mentioned earlier how comedian Rodney Dangerfield had kind of took a shining to Jim, and he actually became like a friend of the family and knew his father. And Rodney Dangerfield would always say, "Why aren't you in the clubs?" Because his dad was such a funny guy.
Yeah.
But obviously he, as Jim said, took the safer route, or what he thought was the safer route, even though he ended up
the more traditional route.
The more traditional route. But the more traditional route is what people think is the safer route. As Jim says, it ended up not being. So you can fail at what you don't want to do. So might as well just go ahead and do the thing you want to do, or at least try. I would love to play the whole thing, but it's about a half hour, and I don't think we have the copyright to do that. But I'll read a couple of clips from it. So on following your passion, he says several other things. He says, so many of us choose our path out of fear, disguised as practicality. What we really want seems impossibly out of reach and ridiculous to expect, so we never dare ask the universe for it. I'm saying that I'm proof you can ask the universe for it. Please. And if it doesn't happen for you right away, it's only because the universe is so busy fulfilling my order. So that's one of the great things. It's not just Jim preaching
on a soapbox. He's also being funny.
It's a very, I mean, he's like the most charismatic guy in the world. He weaves these ideas into the character of Jim, who he's still fully into, obviously. The other themes of that speech, he talks about the nature of fear and love, which kind of is part of that follow your passion comment about choosing your path out of fear disguised as practicality. He urges the graduates to choose love over fear and to let love guide their decisions. He talks about the power of visualization, and he tells the story of writing himself the $10 million check. He says the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. He talks, and this is another theme that has come up a lot for Jim, is the illusory nature of external achievements. How chasing external achievements is not where fulfillment comes from. Fulfillment comes from within.
Yeah.
Pretty common thing, but he's definitely said that a lot. He says, how tricky is the ego that it would tempt us with something we already possess. What do you think he's talking about?
How tricky is the ego that it would tempt us with something we already possess?
Yeah, so he's talking about fulfillment. So fulfillment being within.
Oh,
thus
so
we
if you've
already have
got
it.
it all.
So how do we tap into that?
But your ego makes you think you need something externally to be fulfilled. That is deep. What was your question for me?
What do you think? What is it? I mean,
Oh.
is fulfillment? What is fulfillment within us?
Simply like being happy, satisfied, knowing, that what you have is good enough, or, like your contentment, like having, got someone, you've got people you love, you've got security, those things, just knowing that that's it, and you don't have to chase after more necessarily to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just easier said than done.
Sure.
And then the other thing he says that I thought was, I don't know, it resonated with me. To find real peace, you have to let the armor go. Your need for acceptance can make you invisible in the world. Don't let anything stand in the way of the light that shines through this form. Risk being seen in all of your glory. What do you think he means by that?
That might be going back to the mask a little bit. You're kind of hiding behind the facade that you put out there for the world, when if you were just your true self, letting your light shine through and be who you want to be and what you want to be, that would be better for everyone. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, I think, and he's also talking about, people that want to stand out in some way, I think. So using him as an example, he wants to be a famous comedian at some point in his life, obviously. Yeah. So if he were to keep his armor up and give in to his need for acceptance, which is what he wants, is acceptance. But the easy way to get acceptance is to
not put yourself out there.
To people please, and just not stir the pot, not be different. And I think that's what he means by your need for acceptance can make you invisible in this world. Because if you're just trying to go with the flow, you're going to be like everybody else, and thus become invisible. Whereas if you're trying to stand out, be it in music, in acting, in comedy, you have to do something different that makes you stand out. I mean, the point is to stand out in those fields.
Yeah.
So trying to be like everybody else will make you invisible.
Yeah. He's not wrong. It's just another easier said than done thing.
Yeah. That's all I've got. I think a lot of people have done videos on Jim from this perspective because it was a pretty obvious left turn for him. But then you start looking back and it's not so obvious. He just went a little bit harder in that direction.
Well, almost against his own advice there. It's kind of like once he had made it and had kind of the platform and had the acceptance and, succeeded or had some level of success in his career, that he kind of started being more vocal about all of these ideas.
And then the last thing I'll close with is just a comment that he made that is a good summary, or a good conclusion. He says, "Life is too beautiful to be bored." And I just like that.
I like that too.
All right, that's Jim.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review. And please tune in next week for another edition of A Million Ways to Live. Bye-bye.